Good morning. I was talking to someone on the net yesterday and they wanted to warn me about botnets. So I went to Wikipedia and I had a look at botnets. I'll leave the URL for the link in my usual place. You'll find it where you found this, if you link to my web page from there. Anyway, botnets are something you don't really need to know about unless you're interested in viruses, trojans, worms, and that sort of thing. Because the essential part of a botnet is that you have to have trojans and worms somewhere on a whole stack of machines that can then be controlled, typically to send out perhaps spam emails. Apparently that's how a lot of them are sent out by people's building botnets to control people's machines that then have legitimate accounts where emails can emanate from. And I saw a statistic that someone had come up with about a year ago that seemed to indicate that they thought 1/4 of all the computers on the internet actually were affected by botnets. Now, whether that means they're actually part of the cycle whereby a virus was on their machine that was therefore making them part of the producer part of it rather than the receiver part, if you like, I don't know. It wasn't clear from what I read. But anyway, in reading the article on Wikipedia, what became totally apparent to me was that for all these viruses, as per usual, to be able to survive, they need to be hosted on a machine that's running Microsoft Windows. There aren't viruses for Linux or Unix or whatever, and at least if anyone were to write one that ran under those operating systems, because of the way security is set up on Unix and most Linux distros, it's not possible for a virus to actually remain in a machine, simply because you can log in, or someone can log in as root and remove it, or if normally you're only working as your normal user and your security is set up properly, that is to say you haven't compromised security, then you won't be able to infect your machine down into the operating system because you just can't get access to the file areas that get loaded in, for instance, if you're not root. Now, if you become root, then you're God, and that's fine. You should know what you're doing. And if you don't, certainly you have full control over your machine. But it's a fundamental difference between that setup and the Microsoft Windows setup, whereby even if you're an administrator, you're not actually super user of your machine. Super user of a Windows machine is Microsoft, because the install is done and subsequent processes are run as not a user, but as system. And Windows Administrator is just an administrative user. So there's a fundamental difference in Microsoft. That's one fundamental difference in the Microsoft setup, the way they've deliberately designed it, and Unix or Linux. So the bottom line is, viruses and things have got nothing to do with the Linux world, and if you get sick of viruses and you get sick of wasting your time having to buy all the software to combat them and have to waste all your time, which is more money, still trying to get rid of them and worry about them and read about them and do this, that and the next thing about viruses, then just get off Windows and go over to Linux and forget that viruses ever existed, because that's what I do, and I've been on Linux now for 10 years and I've never been infected for 10 years. I do sit behind a firewall and I use standard sort of security that's afforded in Linux, and I don't wreck that security by doing something silly with the security setup, which I could do if I wanted to log in as root and make some changes, but I mean, why would I want to kill myself? So I'm not going to do that. So in the absence of doing something stupid, generally speaking, in Linux, you're safe. The guy came over to wash dogs just nearby here, and I have a chat to him all the time. And he knows I'm involved in IT, so he starts bleating on about viruses and what happened about these machines and what's got wrecked lately, and I get so sick of hearing it that yesterday I just told him, look, I've told you what to do, get off Windows. If you don't want to do that, put up with the viruses, but please, go away and don't annoy me about them because it's boring, I'm not interested, I'm not affected, I've told you how to do something so you're no longer affected and you choose not to do that. That's your problem. If you want viruses and you want to muck around in all of that crap, stay with Windows. Enjoy the time. Enjoy the fun. I've got better things to do. So anyway, on the Wikipedia article about botnets, I did try to point out that only Windows machines are affected by this sort of viral activity. Although, of course, anyone running a Linux box or anything can still receive some of the resultant spam email that come out of botnets, but the virus part that makes it all propagate relies on Windows machines. Now, I did put a sentence in to a couple of articles to try and point that out, and I did it twice because they got pulled out, probably pulled out twice now, because there's this whole insidious lack of information about viruses. You'll even see it on the news where they'll say, blah, blah number of PCs are affected by viruses. What they should be saying is blah, blah numbers of PCs running Microsoft Windows are affected by viruses. But everyone thinks PC, not Windows PC. They think, oh, PC, that implies Windows, doesn't it? Well, I've got news for you. No, it doesn't. There are better alternatives out there. And they're free. They don't cost a cent. You don't have to pay any more for software and more software and more software and upgrades every year to the software. You just stick it all your software on a Linux platform, and it automatically upgrades whenever upgrades come out. Not only of the operating system, but all the applications that you put on, as long as you use the package manager, which of course you would, there's no reason not to do it, but use the package manager that comes with Linux, put your software on, and it automatically keeps itself up to date from there till eternity, and it all costs you nothing, and there are no viruses anywhere in your world anymore. Have a good day.